So let's get into some biases that women are up against, especially within STEM, starting with age bias. Neema, do you have any? And by the way, this can come at both ends of the spectrum. Young women can face age bias, and older women can face age bias. And you shared during our prep, Neema, a story with me about a bias you experienced when you were much younger getting into the profession. Would you share that?
Definitely. Yeah, typically the discrimination for age is spoken for older generation, right? And it's always like, okay, the baby boomers are facing discrimination. But I think there's a lot of discrimination even when you start young or like at the younger ages. And that's kind of ignored because there's no one to complain to. At least in the older generation, there's like somebody taking note of it because some of their friends are in the top positions. Let's say when I was transitioning from, let's say, mid management to senior management, I was giving some interviews, and every time I would go to the interview, I would hear this like, oh, you're too young for the job. No one said that, oh, you don't know this or you don't know that, but they were always like, oh, you're too young. Do you think you should wait for a few years? Do you really feel prepared for this role? And I could never understand why. And then, like, yes, I have a short hair and probably look 1 or 2 years younger than I am, but I'm not really that young, right? So obviously you can't talk about your date of birth during your interview. So the next thing I did was I actually tried this as an experiment, and it really worked. So I bought this really thick rimmed glasses and wore it for my next interview. No issues about age at all after that. And so I have an interview glass that I use, and then there's this regular glass. So am I supposed to be doing that? At some point, I'm like really thinking, should I be actually doing this? And then I realized there's this lot of discrimination when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
And I was given the offer, whether I took it or not is a different story, but I was given an offer with a thick rim glass. So there is discrimination, but that is not real. That's ignored, And so somewhere, I think as women or as people, as human beings, we should help each other and get over that bias. No one is questioning Mark Zuckerberg why he was a CEO at 23, for example. But everyone questioned New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda for going out for a party because she was young.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why is that so different? The yardstick I think they need to change. Yeah.
Absolutely. Eleanor, I know you have some statistics and insights.
Yes, always got a statistic. So this is actually an area I've only been looking into more recently, is like that intersectionality between age and gendered bias. And I found a really interesting article that basically says there's no right time to be a woman because you're either too young or you're too old. And there's this like, the article mentions there's a nanosecond of time in a woman's career where she's might not be subject to so much ageism. But you're right, it's absolutely like quite a prevalent bias that women face. And stats vary but we're at least 5% more likely across the board to experience ageism than men. And in different age categories, like I think I read a statistic that from 59 to 65-year-old women are 88% of them felt like they had experienced age-related bias. And that was significantly more than the male average for those ages, right? All of these, the predominant feeling that the experience of that ageism tends to be, I feel like my opinions are ignored. So when it comes to countering the bias, I think the most important thing we can do is, and again, this applies once we're in roles a little bit more than in the interview stages, like you say, Neema, sometimes we just got to do what we got to do to get the job, right? Once we're in a role, feeling like my opinion's being ignored, the main thing I've been able to do is kind of walk people through my thinking. And I found that if someone says something that I really disagree with, and I say, I think you're wrong, we should do this instead, they just dismiss it. Whereas if I go, I've got questions about why we would do it your way. Can you walk me through it? What I heard you say is this. And they go, yes, that's what we should do. And I say, okay, well, but doesn't that introduce this problem? Does this problem outweigh the benefits you're talking about? And I can kind of slowly walk them to the point where they go, oh, it might not be the best idea, actually. And I've had a lot of success with doing that. It's annoying and it's unfortunate that I have to kind of slow everything down. And in some ways it's felt, especially when I was more junior in my career, it felt like I was almost lessening myself by doing that. I make myself seem more ignorant than I am by having to ask these questions, but it did get people to engage with me enough that they would listen to my opinion. Now that I'm in more of a senior position, then what I tend to do is focus on establishing common ground. So if there's a disagreement amongst multiple people, including me, I say, well, it sounds like we all agree that this is a problem that needs to be solved, right? And by kind of reframing the discussion and saying, what can we agree on? It kind of helps us step through that process again of what are the important facets? Okay, here's where we disagree. Let's focus on that. So it's about using the skills that I think women on average do have more of around those communications and those relationship building skills, leaning into the things we have strengths at to manage those conversations and get people to take the time to really listen to what we have to say.
Excellent point, Eleanor. The paraphrasing, just the things that you can do with your communication skills, of which women have stronger, to positively influence the outcome.